let's work through this production or process costing demonstration problem, and I'm going to solve this one in 2 screens, so if it jumps, I'm merely going from one tab of Excel to another. Okay, the problem appears before you. We're talking about the Sullivan Company, and they manufacture blankets and they pass products through a weaving department and a sewing department, and we have some data available that we're going to use to solve the problem. And in this demonstration, we'll walk through what's required in number 1, which is to compute the cost of the products transferred from the weaving to the sewing department, and then compute the cost of the products transferred from the sewing to the finished goods, and then also come up with cost of goods sold. Okay, well, we have some data at the beginning. We have some beginning inventory data, some ending inventory data, and we have some additional information as well that appears in the middle section. Now, since we need to compute the costs of the weaving department, the sewing department, and eventually what was transferred to finished goods into cost of goods sold, I'm going to lay out the solution in 3 columns: the weaving, the sewing, and the finished goods. So let's flip the tab here and enter the beginning inventory and the direct materials and the direct labor. Now, the beginning inventory for the weaving department is going to come from that number right to the right of my mouse, right? The beginning number of the weaving, is that 300,000. Then 570 is the beginning sewing. Then we're going to need to add in direct materials. Well, that's provided here, 240 and 75 by department. And then we also have the labor used, 1,002,000 and 360. So let's get that far at least. Okay, so let's start off by indicating what the beginning inventory is. For weaving, from the problem, we went over 300,000. Sewing is 570,000. And beginning finished goods, also given, was 1,266,000. Okay, then let's add in direct materials. Okay, 240,000 came from weaving, 75,000 came from sewing. The other item that I pointed out on the other sheet was direct labor. I think I actually did a couple of them. Let me type that right. Direct labor, 1,002,000. And for the sewing, it's 360,000, right? And then the next thing we need to do is consider the overhead applied. So let's go back and see if we see that where the 1,002,000 and the 360 came from. Okay, there's the 1,002,000 right above my mouse. Right here. The labor used was 1,002,000 to the right. Sewing was 360. And we see that overhead rate is applied as a percentage of direct labor in the percentages of 80% and 150%. So let's go ahead and put that in as well. And I'm just going to put respectively as an abbreviation here, and we'll enter equals 80% times that number. And this number is going to be equal 150% times the labor component, which is sitting in cell D6, the cell above it. Okay? Now, once we have that, we now, at least for the weaving company, know our total costs. And we simply can sum from above, right? We come up with 2,007,000. Okay, but we need to figure out how much of that we're going to transfer into sewing. Now, you all remember the normal formula: beginning plus what you entered or produced less the ending must equal what's transferred. So let's back out ending inventory from the weaving department. And where did that number come from? Well, we've got an ending inventory of 330. There it is right there. So that number needs to go here. I'm going to enter that as a negative. I will compute an item that we'll just call is the transferred value amount, transferred cost to sewing, right? And that's going to be equal to the total costs, which includes the beginning, less the ending. Since I've entered as a negative, I'll simply add those two together, right? 2370. Now, if that's transferred to sewing, why don't we show that cost appearing in the sewing number, right? And if we do that, then what we can do is determine what was our total costs for the sewing department. And the total cost for the sewing department would then be the beginning plus labor incurred and overhead incurred and what was transferred in. So we can simply use the summation of all of those costs. Sewing then is 3915 and 3 zeros. But of course, we have to do the same thing. We have to back out the ending inventory from the sewing department. And the ending inventory of the sewing department is 700,000, the number to the left of my mouse there. So let's enter that as a negative. And I will copy this cell here because it'll give me the exact same thing. So we have 39 less the 700,000 gets us to 3,215,000. And I'm going to copy this rather than typing. Now we've determined the transferred cost to finished goods. Okay, you all follow that we're working through the flow of costs in this problem? So if we show that as our item to finished goods would be the beginning plus what we produced, right? Transferred in cost. Okay, and then we simply have to subtract off what was in ending finished goods. Okay, now there's lots of ways you could lay out the problem, but this way seems to work pretty good for me. Okay, what was ending finished goods? We started off with 1266, we ended with 1206 in thousands, right? Oh, let me enter that as a negative. If you bear with me, I will err. Let me do it here where you can see it on the screen. I'll hit my F2 key, put a negative in front, then hit the enter, right? I can do the underline, copy this formula to here. I'll hit the F2 so you can see what I did, just, plus the two cells above. I have an error. My mistake. This one has to be the sum of all the cost. I left off the beginning. So my error, now that's corrected. And now we've computed the ending answer, that the last part of part A that we were looking for. And I will just format that with a double underscore to show that that's the last item we wanted. And we'll call that cost of goods sold. Okay? And we've demoed this problem. Well, how did I come up with the cost of goods sold? I took the beginning finished goods plus transferred in cost less ending. How did we come up with the total cost of sewing? We took the beginning inventory plus the any value of any cost we incurred, direct material, labor, and overhead, plus any transferred in costs, right? Backed out the ending inventory to come up with the answer. Weaving cost, there's no transferred in cost as a factor, so we merely take the beginning inventory. We add in the costs associated with the weaving department, which would be direct materials, labor, and overhead. Back off the ending, and we come up with the total cost. So in this problem, the answers that they were looking for was the cost of the weaving department, the cost of the sewing department, the transferred in costs, and the end cost. So if I bold all those, that answers the questions in part A. Okay? I'll go back to the end now so you can, I'll go back to the starting page so you can see the problem. And we've answered parts A, B, and C, which was required. The answer's in front of you. And that should take care of part 1. Thank you, everyone.